My name is Maya Vance. I am 32 years old, and for the last 4 years of my life, my extended family has referred to my independent commercial existence as that sterile, greedy corporate shell. To the elite country club circles that my mother and stepfather frequent, my name was always introduced with a heavy, performative sigh, as the cold, stubborn daughter who chose legal ledgers and investment calculations over family loyalty. But outside of their artificial, high society bubble, I am the managing director of a commercial infrastructure asset group that structures, funds, and licenses premium commercial pavilion properties across 3 states. I know the exact structural cost of a square foot of premium construction marble, the zoning laws of prime city blocks, and the interest rates of a $20 million institutional line of credit, the way most people know their own birthdays or their children's phone numbers. So on a rainy Thursday afternoon, when my phone buzzed after 4 long years of absolute, freezing, radio silence from my mother, I felt a familiar cold sensation settle behind my ribs. I opened the notification. It was an invitation, a message filled with warm, carefully curated, and almost heavily rehearsed words. My mother wrote that she and my stepfather, Julian, had been doing a tremendous amount of deep soul-searching. They wanted to invite me to a private, luxury dinner at the Sovereign Ridge Estate, the most expensive historic estate restaurant on the northern coast, to put the old bitterness behind us, heal the wounds, and start fresh as a family. 30 seconds later, a second text arrived from her, containing the exact 5-word thesis statement that had governed my entire childhood before I finally broke free. Family takes care of family, sweetheart. It's time we remembered that. When I read those words, I should have stopped. I should have locked my phone, turned my vehicle around, and asked one highly clinical, logical question before I ever put my keys in the ignition. Who engineered the guest list, and what is the real financial price of this reconciliation? But I didn't ask. The human brain is a fragile thing, and despite years of professional distance, a small, hidden part of me wanted to believe that 4 years of absence had actually changed the predatory foundation of my family. I drove 45 minutes up the coast highway in the middle of a storm. I dressed simply on purpose. A plain charcoal blazer, tailored dark slacks, flat leather shoes, and absolutely no jewelry except for the simple steel watch I bought myself the day I cleared my very first independent corporate escrow. I didn't want to walk into that room looking like I was performing success. My family already claimed I flaunted my achievements. But the moment I pushed open the heavy, brass-handled double doors of the Sovereign Ridge Estate's private ballroom, the thick scent of vintage champagne, imported delicacies, and unchecked social entitlement hit my face like a physical wall. There wasn't a quiet, intimate family reconciliation of 3 waiting for me. There were 14 members of my extended family already seated around a 20-foot mahogany table. The surface was completely covered in ice platters of black caviar, prime rib roasts, gold leaf appetizers, and empty bottles of a $600 vintage Italian wine that they had already finished pouring and drinking long before my truck had even cleared the valet parking lot. My stepfather, Julian, sat at the head of the table like a corporate king presiding over a court. He looked up, adjusted the heavy gold signet rings on his fingers, flashed a wide, artificial smile, and delivered the exact line they had spent weeks engineering in their private communication channels. "Maya, sweetheart, you're handling the main ledger tonight, right? After all, family takes care of family." The entire table broke into a synchronized chorus of soft, expectant, pitying smiles. My half-sister, Chloe, smirked from her velvet seat, her smartphone already tilted at an angle, waiting to record my submission. They thought they had designed the ultimate social trap. They believed that the quiet, non-confrontational daughter wouldn't dare cause a scene in front of the city's high society elite. What they hadn't counted on, what they hadn't bothered to check, was that I didn't just fund commercial spaces. They had absolutely no idea about the legal restructuring notice and the debt acquisition forms I had signed on my corporate desk just 48 hours prior to walking into this room. Welcome back to Silent Storm Storms, where ordinary people face calculated family ambushes and walk out with the entire building. If you've ever been treated like an open bank account by people who completely ignored your existence
we need the
until their
scaffolding
own
over here
debts
now.
came due, take a deep breath, hit
Watch
that
the line.
subscribe button, and drop a comment below. Because tonight, the performance is officially over, and the credit lines are frozen solid. To understand the absolute certainty sitting at that mahogany table, you have to understand the specific, cold currency of the
lights on
Vance
level
family.
5.
In my parents' house,
Powering up
affection
now,
was
looks
never
good.
a gift. It was a
Almost done with
high-interest
the greenery
loan.
on the west
When you were
side.
yielding a high social return for them, you were placed in the front display window to be shown off to their country club friends. When you demanded structural logic, accountability, or refused to let them liquidate your hard work to finance their illusions, you were treated as a liability, written off the books, and completely removed from the family circle. 4 years ago, the fracture occurred because of my half-sister, Chloe. Chloe was the golden child, a girl whose entire life had been cushioned by my parents' desperate need to appear wealthy. She decided, on a complete whim, that she wanted to launch an independent, luxury fashion boutique downtown. She didn't have an operational framework, she didn't have a market analysis, she didn't have a logistics budget, and she hadn't secured a single reliable supplier network. She had simply visited a high-end showroom in Miami with gold fixtures, silk drapes, and minimalist lighting, and thought to herself, I could be a creative director. The commercial landlord of the premium retail space she wanted demanded a $90,000 personal corporate guarantee to secure the 5-year lease. Because my parents' own finances were a chaotic web of credit card balancing acts and second mortgages, they turned to me. They naturally assumed that my corporate signature, my pristine credit rating, and my hard-earned business capital would appear on the dotted line without a single question. I sat down with them in their living room, looking at the lease documents. I didn't yell. I didn't start an argument. I simply asked to see Chloe's projected cash flow statements. I asked about her break-even point, her inventory turnover rates, and her liability insurance. Chloe didn't answer. Instead, she stared at me as if I had personally insulted her character, her eyes filling with tears. My stepfather, Julian, stood up so quickly his chair scraped violently against the hardwood floor. He slammed his fist against the glass table, his face turning a dark, furious red, and delivered the sentence that officially ended our relationship for the next 4 years. You've become cold and corporate, Maya. You care more about your mechanical spreadsheets and your sterile numbers than your own sister's dreams. If you won't back this family when we ask, then you don't belong under our roof, and you don't belong in our lives. The very next morning, I discovered I had been blocked from every single digital family channel, group chat, and photo-sharing album. For over 1,000 days, I was the greedy, heartless daughter who had abandoned her family for corporate greed. My parents went ahead and financed Chloe's boutique themselves by taking out a high-interest secondary lien against their own residential property. Predictably, without an operational foundation, the boutique collapsed into absolute financial ruin exactly 14 months after the grand opening, leaving behind a massive trail of unpaid commercial debt, broken supplier contracts, and a pending foreclosure notice from the bank. And yet, here they were tonight at the Sovereign Ridge estate, surrounded by prime rib, caviar, and $600 wine, putting on a spectacular, aggressive performance of high society luxury. It was a desperate, exhausting attempt to mask a financial house that was actively burning down to the ground. As I sat down in the empty velvet chair at the far end of the long table, the visual irony of the room was striking. 14 people were indulging in a lavish feast without a single glance at the right-hand column of the menu, while I sat quietly with nothing but a single glass of plain ice water. Aunt Sarah leaned across her husband, Uncle Greg, her diamond-encrusted bracelet clinking loudly against her porcelain plate. Must be absolutely wonderful running an entire commercial development firm, while the rest of us are struggling with basic market adjustments. Maya, she said, her voice laced with that sharp, artificial cackle people use when they want you to know they are being completely serious. My cousin Marcus chimed in from the middle of the table, asking if I ever felt a sense of personal guilt living so comfortably while my parents were facing temporary economic realignments. An alignment that no one had ever bothered to tell me about. Chloe, without even looking up from her smartphone screen, added in a loud whisper, "She wouldn't know, Marcus. Maya only shows up when she wants to look important in front of people." Every single comment landed with the precise, practiced rhythm of a calculated ambush. They hadn't invited me to heal. They had arrived tonight with a pre-established narrative that had been discussed, refined, and agreed upon in my absence. Maya left. Maya has millions. Maya owes us the balance. I watched the young server, a kid named Leo who couldn't have been older than 20, moving frantically around our massive 14-top table. He was pale, his shirt collar slightly damp from sweat, running entirely on pure nervous energy, and the exhausting fear of a hospitality worker who knows that a large, high-society party can ruin his entire week's income with a single negative report to the general manager. Every time my stepfather snapped his fingers in the air to demand another bottle of premium wine, Leo moved with instant, trembling precision. I caught his eye as he carefully refilled my plain ice water. "Tough room," I murmured quietly, keeping my tone gentle. "Just
we need
trying
the scaffolding
to keep the
over here
right,
now,
man," he whispered back, his hands shaking
line.
slightly as he adjusted the silver pitcher. They've been ordering continuously for an hour and a half. I knew his position perfectly. I had worked those exact double shifts when I was putting myself through corporate design school, learning how to survive the arrogance of customers who treated the service staff like
Powering
furniture.
up now, looks
But
good.
that version of me was gone.
Almost done with the
The
greenery on
woman
the west
sitting
side.
here tonight was an executive who knew exactly how much a family ambush cost before the bill was ever printed. By the 1-hour mark of the dinner, the emotional manipulation inside the private room was becoming physically suffocating. The air was thick with the scent of expensive food and cheap intentions. Every toast my stepfather made, every laugh from Aunt Sarah, was a calculated psychological layer designed to pressure me into a state of guilt. They wanted me to feel small. They wanted me to believe that my financial success was a crime against the family peace, a crime that could only be pardoned by writing a massive check. I excused myself to the restroom, needing a few minutes of absolute, unyielding clarity away from the theater. The Sovereign Ridge Estates restroom was a massive, sterile suite of white Calicut marble, gold fixtures, and custom lavender lighting. I turned on the brass faucet, pressing freezing water against my wrists, watching my heart rate stabilize in the mirror. I forced myself to breathe deeply, resetting the emotional boundaries I had spent 4 years constructing. As I reached for a cloth towel near the wash basin, I noticed a sleek, gold-rimmed smartphone sitting carelessly on the edge of the marble vanity. It had a bright pink designer case covered in luxury brand stickers. Chloe's phone. She had left it behind, a permanent, unchangeable habit of a girl who had spent her entire existence expecting someone else to follow behind her and pick up her scattered wreckage. The screen was completely unlocked, fully illuminated, displaying a live notification from a private group text message titled The Restoration Project. The members of this private group were only 3: my mother, my stepfather Julian, and Chloe. I picked up the device. I did not do it out of a sense of petty curiosity or anger, but with the cold, diagnostic, and clinical focus of a commercial property inspector examining a severe structural defect in a foundation. I scrolled upward through the text threads spanning the past 2 weeks, and the reality of the dinner unfolded in stark, digital print. My mother's text message from Tuesday morning read, "Make sure Maya doesn't find out the whole extended family is attending the dinner. Once she is physically trapped at the table with 14 people watching her, she won't dare refuse to cover the balance. She has always lacked the stomach for public scenes." My stepfather's response followed immediately below it, time-stamped an hour later. "The Sovereign Ridge manager already has my old corporate credit card on file just to hold the ballroom reservation, but that line is completely maxed out. Make sure she sits directly to my right. I'll deliver the final pitch for the commercial bailout once the wine has softened her up." Chloe's contribution was time-stamped minutes later. "Order all the premium caviar platters and the $600 Italian vintage before she even arrives in the parking lot. Once the food is physically on the table and half-eaten, she can't exactly walk out without looking like a monster." Lol, I kept scrolling further down the digital ledger of their deception. A message from my mother sent 8 days ago read, "The primary mortgage bank called again this morning. If we don't clear the secondary lien from the boutique failure by next month, they will officially initiate the foreclosure on our house." Maya's commercial cash reserves can clear our entire balance in one single wire transfer. We just have to make her feel like she's part of the family again. And then, the final line of absolute, unyielding arrogance from my stepfather Julian, which closed the thread. We aren't asking her for a handout. We are giving her a rare chance to buy her way back into this family's good graces. She should be profoundly grateful we are even throwing her this financial lifeline. Grateful. They wanted me to feel a deep, heavy debt of gratitude for the honor of being systematically manipulated into a 14-person corporate ambush. They wanted me to feel privileged to settle a commercial bankruptcy that I had actively, explicitly warned them against 4 years ago. They expected the child they had completely erased from their lives to turn into their ultimate financial savior on command, simply to protect their vanity at the country club. I set Chloe's phone back down on the cold marble counter exactly where I had found it, screen down, matching its original position to the millimeter. I looked at myself in the mirror. My pulse was completely steady. My hands were perfectly dry. The old childhood fixer reflex, the survival mechanism that had spent decades smoothing over every parental crisis, financing every hidden debt just to keep the dinner table quiet, fired one last time in my chest. Just sign the check, Maya. Pay the money. Make the storm go away. But I looked at the steel watch on my wrist. I remembered the 4 years of absolute, freezing cold silence. I remembered the holidays spent alone in my condo, while they posted photos of family vacations funded by secondary debts. The machine was officially out of service. I walked back out into the oak-paneled ballroom. My face was completely calm, pleasant, and fully operational. I sat back down in my velvet chair, picked up my glass of plain ice water, and watched the family dynamic with entirely new eyes. The trap was fully set, the audience was smiling, and the premium dessert menus were just being distributed by the staff. They truly believed the transaction was already complete. They had no idea that the bill they had generated wasn't going to land where they planned. As the dessert plates were cleared, the atmosphere in the private ballroom shifted from artificial celebration to tactical positioning. The final phase of their architecture was moving into place. My stepfather, Julian, leaned back in his leather chair, crossing his arms over his expensive tailored suit jacket. He cleared his throat. A specific, heavy sound I had heard him make before signing bad contracts, before delivering empty speeches, and before telling me at 23 that I was selfish for wanting to save my own money instead of buying him a new boat. He looked across the length of the mahogany table, his eyes locked onto mine with the absolute confidence of a man who believed he held all the cards. "Maya, sweetheart," he said, his voice carrying clearly over the soft music playing in the background. "You're handling the ledger tonight, right? You owe us that much for bringing the family back together." The entire table went dead silent. 14 faces froze, their eyes shifting between Julian and me, waiting for the predictable submission they had spent 2 weeks planning. My mother offered a soft, rehearsed nod of encouragement. Chloe smirked, taking a slow sip of her vintage wine. Aunt Sarah clutched her wine glass, her face bright in expectation. I didn't answer right away. One of the greatest assets I have acquired in the high-stakes world of commercial real estate development is the mastery of absolute silence. In a room full of people who are desperate for compliance, a prolonged silence acts like an environmental vacuum. It strips away their confidence, forces them to squirm in their seats, and makes their engineered performance. I walked out of the private ballroom, the heavy oak doors closing behind me, cutting off the low, celebratory chatter of the Vance family. I didn't head toward the elegant front reception desk, where the wealthy patrons usually settled their bills. Instead, I turned down the long, carpeted service corridor that led straight to the management suites of the Sovereign Ridge estate. The general manager, a man named Mr. Harrison, was sitting behind a massive walnut desk, reviewing the weekend banquet schedules. He looked up, his professional smile instantly locking into place as he recognized me. He didn't see an anonymous dinner guest. He saw the managing director of Vanguard Infrastructure, the corporate entity that had funded the entire seaside pavilion development just 2 miles down the coast. "Miss Vance," he said, standing up immediately, "I trust everything with the private room is to your liking. Leo has been instructed to give your party absolute priority. The service is flawless, Mr. Harrison, I replied, sitting down in the leather chair across from him, my tone completely businesslike. But we need to address the structural routing of the final invoice. My stepfather, Julian Vance, placed a corporate reservation card on file 2 weeks ago to secure the ballroom. I want you to run that card right now for the full balance of the deal, including the premium vintage wine and caviar purchase. Mr. Harrison hesitated, his eyebrows knitting together
Careful
slightly.
with that, set it down softly.
Of course.
Lights
But
are up,
if
turning
I
them
may
on
be
now.
frank, Miss Vance, our automated billing pre-authorization system flagged that account 3 hours ago. The credit limit on that corporate profile is almost entirely depleted. If we process the full 14-top invoice, it will trigger. Inside the private room, the mood was still riding a wave of arrogant victory. Julian was laughing loudly at a joke Uncle Greg had made, his hand resting expansively on the mahogany table as if he already owned the entire establishment. My mother was smiling, chatting animatedly with Aunt Sarah about the upcoming country club gala. Then, the heavy oak doors opened, and Leo walked in, holding the black leather billing folder. He moved with total silence, bypassing the empty chair where I had sat, and walked straight to the head of the table. With a polite, professional bow, he placed the folder directly in front of Julian. "The final accounting for the evening, sir," Leo said, his voice perfectly neutral. Julian didn't even open the folder. He waved his hand dismissively, flashing a patronizing smile. "My stepdaughter, Maya, went out to handle this at the front desk. She's taking care of the main ledger tonight. Just take it out to her." "The young lady has already left the management office, sir," Leo replied, keeping his eyes locked onto the folder. "And the corporate card you provided on the reservation file was processed for the total balance. The terminal has returned a hard institutional rejection. The card has been declined." The laughter at the table died instantly. It was as if the oxygen had been vacuumed out of the room in one single second. My mother's smile froze, her glass of vintage wine stopping halfway to her lips. "Declined?" Julian repeated, his voice rising, his face flushing with a sudden, ugly shade of red. "That's impossible. Do you have any idea who I am? This is a premium corporate account with Vance Development. Your machine must be broken, boy. Run it again." "We ran it 3 times, sir," Leo said calmly, his training holding under the pressure. "The issuing bank has locked the account due to credit limit exhaustion." Julian snatched the black folder, ripping it open. The long, white slip of paper fluttered out onto the white linen tablecloth for everyone to see. The bold, red-inked text was unmistakable. Transaction DENIED. Chloe leaned forward, her eyes wide with sudden panic. "Dad, what do you mean it's declined? Maya was supposed to pay for this. Where is she? Call her right now." My mother pulled out her phone, her fingers trembling violently as she dialed my number. Across the room, behind the tinted glass gallery, my phone vibrated silently in my hand. I watched the screen light up with her name. I didn't answer. I simply watched her face turn an ash-gray color as the call went straight to voicemail. She blocked my number," my mother whispered, her voice cracking with the realization that the trap had completely reversed. Julian slammed his hand on the table, standing up so violently that his wine glass toppled over, staining the white linen with a deep, blood-red puddle. "This is a setup. She did this on purpose to humiliate us in front of the family." "Julian, please," Aunt Sarah whispered, looking around frantically as the senior guests at neighboring tables began to turn their heads toward the noise. "Just use your personal gold card. Settle the bill so we can leave. This is embarrassing." Julian's hand shook as he reached into his leather wallet and pulled out his personal premium card. He threw it into the folder. "Run this one. And tell your manager I want a full investigation into your terminal errors." Leo took the folder, walked out to the service terminal just outside the door, and swiped the card. 10 seconds later, he walked back in. His expression was completely blank. "I'm terribly sorry, sir," Leo said, his voice echoing in the silent room. "But your personal account has returned a secondary code. The bank states that a legal corporate receivership freeze has been placed on all personal assets associated with the Vance Development name. This card is also invalid." Julian staggered back into his chair, his jaw dropping open, looking at the plastic card as if it had turned into a venomous snake. The high society illusion, the country club vanity, the 14-person celebration of an empire. It all vanished, leaving behind nothing but an unpaid $6,000 bill and a room full of terrified, silent people who finally realized they were trapped in the wreckage of their own greed. The fallout from that evening did not take weeks to materialize. It struck with the brutal velocity of an avalanche because Julian could not provide a valid alternative method of payment. The Sovereign Ridge Estate Management was legally forced to hold his luxury vehicle in the valet compound overnight as security against the unpaid commercial balance. The proud, arrogant king of the Vance family had to call a standard ride-sharing service to pick up 14 members of his extended family from the back gates of the estate in the middle of a torrential
Almost done
downpour.
with the greenery on the west side.
The very next morning, at exactly 9 a.m., my corporate legal team filed the final receivership paperwork with the state licensing board. Vanguard Infrastructure did not just absorb the debts of Vance Development. We seized the underlying assets that Julian had used as collateral for his toxic loans. The primary family residential property, the massive, historic house where I had been told 4 years ago that I was a heartless liability, was officially registered under my corporate holding trust. It has been 1 full year since that rainy night at the Sovereign Ridge Estate. My mother tried to send 3 different handwritten letters to my corporate office, filled with long, emotional paragraphs about maternal love, family forgiveness, and the sacred bond between a mother and her child. I didn't read past the first page. I handed them directly to my compliance officer to be filed under the permanent harassment log. They didn't miss their daughter. They missed the open credit line. Julian's firm was completely liquidated 3 months ago. The heavy gold signet rings he used to flash at the country club were sold along with his luxury vehicles to settle the outstanding secondary liens from Chloe's boutique failure. He currently lives in a modest, 2-bedroom rented townhouse on the industrial edge of the city, working as a junior commercial consultant for a firm managed by one of my former interns. As for Chloe, the golden child who engineered the dinner menu to trap me, her high society status has completely dissolved. Without my parents' capital to finance her luxury wardrobe and designer lifestyle, she was forced to take a standard retail job at a mainstream department store downtown. She spends her days folding clothes for the very customers she used to look down upon from her boutique showroom. Yesterday evening, I drove up the coast highway to the Sovereign Ridge Estate. I wasn't there for a family reconciliation. I was there because Vanguard Infrastructure had just finalized the acquisition of the entire historic estate property from its previous investment group. I walked into the private ballroom, the same room where 14 people had smiled expectantly, waiting for me to surrender my hard work to finance their vanity. The room was empty, the long mahogany table beautifully polished, reflecting the soft amber lights of the chandeliers. Mr. Harrison walked in behind me, holding a digital tablet. "We are ready to begin the structural renovations for the main dining hall, Miss Vance. Do you have any specific directives for this room?" I walked to the head of the table, running my fingers over the cold, dark wood where my stepfather had once sat. "Remove the mahogany table, Mr. Harrison," I said quietly, my voice perfectly calm, matching the deep stillness of the room. "We are breaking down these walls to create a modern, open-concept conference pavilion. I don't like closed rooms where people spend their time engineering traps. From now on, this space will be governed by clear logic, transparent ledgers, and absolute accountability." He nodded, making a quick note on his screen. "And the service staff from that evening, ma'am? Leo. He's already been promoted to the corporate logistics department at our main headquarters," I replied, walking toward the grand double doors. "He knows how to keep his head down and deliver the truth under pressure. That's the only asset that actually holds value in the long run. When you spend your life learning the architecture of boundaries, you realize that the most expensive luxury in the world is letting toxic people define your value. The balance sheet is finally clean, the ledger is locked, and the storm has completely cleared the landscape. Thank you for staying through the entire extended journey tonight on Silent Storm Stories. If you listen to every single word of this 65-minute multi-part account, Do me a final corporate favor. Drop the word ledger in the comments section below so I know who our most dedicated long-form listeners are. Sleep well, protect your financial boundaries, and never let an arrogant hand dictate terms at your table.